Dean Faculty of Political Science of Chulalongkorn University, Director, India Studies Center, Master of India and Thailand, Excellencies, faculty members, students, researchers, friends. Namaskar, Sawadee. I'm really delighted to deliver this talk on India's vision on the Indo-Pacific and this prestigious university. And at the outset, let me express my gratitude to the university for extending this invitation to interact with all of you and for all the arrangements made for the talk. Every vision has its concepts and its assessments. And that is the case with the Indo-Pacific too, where India is concerned. 3 decades ago, we made a strategic correction to the east that was responsible for the rapid flowering of our cooperation with the ASEAN. Originally, it was contemplated as an economic measure with trade and investment at its core. Over the years, India's interaction expanded well beyond the ASEAN to cover Japan, Korea, China, and in due course Australia, and also other areas, the Pacific Islands, for example. The facets of cooperation also increased. They now cover connectivity in various forms, people-to-people ties, and more recently, defense and security. Now, this maturing of what we were doing to the east of India, in our own terminology, we call it as moving up from look east policy to act east policy. Now, what is relevant for our purposes today is to recognize that a very substantial portion of India's interests now lie to the east of India, beyond the Indian Ocean and into the Pacific. Now, during this very period, the landscape also started to change as we saw larger economic and political rebalance. Just as India developed greater interests in the Pacific, countries of East Asia, for example, have also been more visible in the Indian Ocean. Even distant economies actually traverse the sea lanes of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as part of their supply chain networks. The economic reality of globalization was that we were not merely more regional, but actually much more active beyond our region in the search for markets and resources. This is especially so for major economies whose footprint has grown steadily, often in an overlapping manner. And economically, the separation of the Indian Ocean and the Pacific Ocean as distinct compartments look less and less evident. We are quite visibly in each other's proximity, and to pretend otherwise is really not realistic. The political dimension of the Indo-Pacific has been equally strong, but it has actually a very different logic. Simply put, the separation of the Pacific from the Indian Ocean was a direct outcome of American strategic dominance since 1945. As the power distribution has diversified in the last 2 decades, changes were inevitable on this score as well. The repositioning of the US, the rise of China, and also of India, the greater external engagement of Japan and Australia, the wider interests of South Korea, and indeed the broader outlook of the ASEAN itself have all contributed to this transformation. Some of it is also driven by our collective concerns for the global markets. It is is no longer feasible for any one country to assume all the burdens. A more collaborative outlook that transcends the orthodoxy of earlier theatres is the need of the day. At the end of the day, this is about recognizing the realities of globalization and the consequences of rebalance. Only those whose mindsets are built around spheres of influence and who are uncomfortable with democratization of world affairs will dispute the Indo-Pacific state. Let me talk about how India sees the Indo-Pacific, its growth and its opportunities. We consider Indo-Pacific as a region that extends from the eastern shores of Africa to the western shores of America. This is an increasingly seamless space that is home to more than 64% of the global population and which contributes to 60% of the world's GDP. About half of global trade happens through the maritime trade routes in this region. Over the years, this region has seen strong and sustained economic growth spreading across the Pacific Rim, Southeast Asia, South Asia, the Gulf region, and the east and southern coast of Africa. More integration and more collaboration will only add to prosperity and progress. Our Indo-Pacific vision builds on India's Act East policy, the policy that I explained earlier. And the doctrine of what we call SAGAR, SAGAR is an Indian word for ocean, which is an acronym for security and growth for all the region. And this was articulated by our Prime Minister in Mauritius in 2015. We envisage a free, open, inclusive, peaceful, and prosperous Indo-Pacific region, one which is built on a rules-based international order, sustainable and transparent infrastructure investment, freedom of navigation and overflight, unimpeded lawful commerce, mutual respect for sovereignty, peaceful resolution of disputes, as well as equality of all nations. To give concrete shape to India's vision of the Indo-Pacific, we have actually moved on many fronts simultaneously. At the multilateral level, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the Indo-Pacific Oceans Initiative, IPOI, at the 14th East Asia Summit, which was actually held in Bangkok in November of 2019. At a regional and plurilateral level, we have actively fostered the Quad mechanism as well as some important bilateral arrangements. And of course, a bilateral engagement with individual countries of the Indo-Pacific, including especially Thailand, have intensified. Let me make clear that India envisages the ASEAN to be at the center of the Indo-Pacific, both literally and substantially. Our ASEAN partners will surely know that our interactions with them have grown, not reduced, as a result of the Indo-Pacific. Now, insofar as the IPOI is concerned, its focus is on a collaborative effort to better manage, observe, sustain, and secure the maritime domain. It envisages this cooperation under 7 pillars, namely maritime security, maritime ecology, maritime resources, capacity building and resource sharing, disaster risk reduction and management, science, technology and academic cooperation, trade, connectivity, and maritime transport. Notably, the IPOI is an appropriate fit for the ASEAN outlook for the Indo-Pacific, which was adopted under Thailand's chairmanship of the ASEAN in 2019. We are committed to implementing the synergies between the IPOI and the ASEAN outlook to achieve a sustainable future in synchronization with the national goals of all EAS partner countries. This is reflected in the joint statement between ASEAN and India, which was adopted at the 18th ASEAN-India Summit meeting in 2020. Now, India's IPOI, it doesn't envisage a new institutional framework, but will rely on the leaders-led East Asia Summit process, its framework and its activities. It is, in fact, envisaged to be structure-light and cooperation-heavy. And we really don't want to get caught up in institutional divergences and differences. And we are willing to work with everybody in the region to take over the IPOI. Countries in the Indo-Pacific, and in fact countries beyond the Indo-Pacific, even in Europe, have announced a vision or the guidelines or the outlook for the Indo-Pacific. And harmonizing these various perspectives is surely possible, we believe, if there is genuine commitment to international cooperation. India's approach towards the Indo-Pacific under the IPOI looks to establish a safe, secure, and stable maritime domain. Some of the EAS countries have taken a lead in working on leading various pillars of the IPOI initiative, and already Australia has announced that it will lead on the maritime ecology pillar, Japan on the connectivity pillar, Indonesia and France on the marine resources pillar, Singapore on the science, technology and academic cooperation pillar, and the UK on maritime security. So the picture which I am presenting to you is one where we are constructing practical, result-oriented cooperation among the East Asia Summit countries within the existing architecture and initiatives, while also exploring new ideas, including the domain of maritime cooperation, towards effective promotion and implementation of our Indo-Pacific vision. Just to give you an example, we have recently organized a seminar on IUU fishing, on marine pollution, including marine plastic debris, jointly with Australia and Singapore, and also with the East Asia Summit Conference on maritime security cooperation with Australia. Now, autonomously of what I have described to you, there are also other processes which are taking place, which contribute to developments in the Indo-Pacific. On the economic side, the in-principle decision to initiate the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, IPEF, is a significant development. Further consultations are taking place among its 14 members to get concrete shape. The flexibility and inclusivity of that process will obviously be central to success. Another interesting effort is the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness Initiative that concentrates on maritime safety, IUU fishing, and consequences of natural disasters. This too can help fill many gaps in the region. The Quad is the most prominent plurilateral platform that addresses contemporary challenges and opportunities in the Indo-Pacific. It has in recent years been meeting at the highest level. We had a summit in Tokyo just a few months ago. And that itself is an indication of how substantive this work has become. The energies of the Quad are directed at a very broad range of activities. They range from maritime safety and security, humanitarian assistance and disaster relief, cyber security, critical and emerging technologies, and connectivity, to education, health, and even space cooperation. The role of the Quad in the delivery of public goods can also be very significant. We are confident, in fact, that the entire Indo-Pacific region will benefit from its activities. And that is validated while the growing recognition of its importance in the international community. If there are reservations in any quarter, these stem from a desire to exercise a veto on the choices of others, and possibly a unilateralist opposition to collective and cooperative interests. While the Indo-Pacific has a strong maritime connotation, there are continental developments which also have a direct bearing on this future. I refer here, amongst others, to the India-Myanmar-Thailand trilateral highway that has the potential of creating a completely new axis of economic activity in Asia. The IMGT project has had its fair share of challenges, but we are determined to bring it to an early conclusion. Already, countries to the east of Myanmar and countries to the east of Thailand have expressed interest in getting connected to it. Such a lateral connectivity can radically expand the interface between Southeast Asia and South Asia to the mutual benefit of all. So where does Thailand and our relationship, the India-Thai relationship, where do they fit into a vision and agenda of the Indo-Pacific? I would suggest to you that Thailand does so both as a partner and as an exemplar. You are all aware that for us, Thailand is a civilizational area, as also an economic, political, maritime, and increasingly a strategic area. One has to only look back at history, and I think that was mentioned in the introductory remarks as well, to appreciate the long-standing closeness of our people and traditions. And I was reminded of it only this morning when I went to offer my prayers at the Pakistan. In recent years, we have added more dimensions to our lives, including the security law. Even this trip of mine is actually a reflection of these developments, because I'm here to co-chair along with the Deputy Foreign Minister on the Joint Commission for the Land between our two governments. But I would urge you to think in much more big picture terms, keeping the long view in mind. India-Thailand cooperation is actually best symbolized by the king after whom this university is named. Because King Chulalongkorn had paid a royal visit to India in 1872 and subsequently in 1950. We were also thereafter honored to receive another royal visit by King Bajirao, the founder of this university. But this university is also associated with big Indian nationalists, among them Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose and Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore. They fought in their time for the identity and preservation under much more difficult circumstances. I emphasize this because today the prospects for the global order depend very much on a more equitable and democratic distribution of power and resources. For that to happen, the world must obviously be more multipolar. But such a multipolar world must necessarily have a multipolar Asia at its center. This will happen only if we Asian countries consolidate our independence and expand our freedom of choices. Thailand, in many ways, has been an example in this respect because it navigated the most complex conflicts at the frontiers. Our expectation is that individually, bilaterally, and collectively with ourselves, we contribute to the emergence of a more stable, secure, and prosperous university. I would also hope that the university, through its own activities, can help build closer cooperation with India, keeping in mind that such cooperation are an important aspect of the larger changes. which is notable to the Chulalongkorn University and the Northeastern Hill University of India are collaborating on a research project to exchange knowledge in language, art, culture, and society, and to strengthen the understanding between our peoples. The Indo-Pacific region traces a wide arc of immense diversity, but with specific dynamics. Thailand is a key ASEAN state, which is the second largest economy of Southeast Asia. Our time-tested relations are poised to move today to the next level. We are marking the 75th year of our diplomatic relations, since Thailand was among the earliest partners of our independent period. We work not just in the ASEAN framework, but in a range of other contexts, including the BIMSTEC, of which also Thailand has just become the chair. We have a strong and vibrant Indian-origin community in Thailand, which has been a bridge between the two countries. India looks forward to working closely with Thailand for its active participation in the implementation and progress of our vision of the Indo-Pacific. So with these words, let me thank all of you for joining me today, this morning, for this talk. We hope to obviously have the continued support and engagement, not just of the government of Thailand, but of our people, of our institutions, of our younger generations, because it is only then that we can construct a partnership that is mutually beneficial and ensure there is peace, progress, and harmony in the Indo-Pacific. Thank you very much.
Oh yes, microphone.
Namaste, Minister. Thank you very much for a very comprehensive speech. Could you please explain why India continues to maintain close diplomatic relations with the Myanmar junta, who are executing political prisoners and massacring civilians? Does India recognise that it might be undermining ASEAN's efforts to broker peace in Myanmar by treating the junta as a legitimate government? As the world's largest democracy, does India share concerns about next year's elections in Myanmar being a complete sham and not being fair and free? And what contact has your government had with the ousted lawmakers of the NAGA?
Okay, thank you very much. Okay.
You are from the university? I'm sorry, you didn't introduce yourself.
Sorry, Lisa Martin, I'm a journalist with AFP.
See, this is a free atmosphere where you can ask questions to the minister. Also, students of international relations are here for Indo-Pacific's question as well. So, if you would also confine the questions to the topic as well. Is that okay? So we try to balance it as much as we can throughout the day. Yes,
let me give you some context and background so that you understand the Myanmar elections. We are a neighbor of Myanmar, land neighbor. We are not a country far away. We are a land neighbor just like Thailand is a land neighbor. Now, when you are an immediate neighbor and sharing borders, you have an understanding, you have interest, you have an empathy, which is very different from what people far away convey when they often pontificate on matters which are very different. Now, our support for democracy, not just in Myanmar, in fact, in our entire region, it's been part of our political history since we became independent. We have actually consistently been supportive of democracy, of pluralism, of human rights, of progress in the larger region. In the case of Myanmar, our approach is not something which started with something last year, which is responding to what is immediate. It's a consistent trend. It's a trend which goes back to the 1980s, I would even say to the 1950s, perhaps even earlier, when Myanmar was struggling for freedom from colonialism. So our relationship is not something which should be judged necessarily by the politics of the day, by the interests of the day, by a geopolitical, or I would say in a sense, an ideological lens. Now, having said that, where are we today? We deeply believe that Myanmar is best served by being a democracy, by reflecting what are the sentiments and the wishes of its people, just like, Thailand and India are similarly concerned. Now, obviously, there are, as a neighbor, we can't be impervious to the day-to-day management. We have a border, we have insurgents on the border, we have organized crime, we have COVID, we have refugees. So these are all factors which you deal with when you're a landlord. When you're not a landlord, when you're far away, then COVID is not part of your calculation. Then, people crossing the border is not part of your calculation. Then life is very binary, it's very black and white. Now, the realities of governance, the realities of development, the realities of neighborliness, these are all factors, I think, which go into our country. So, I want you to understand, I would say it's natural for a country like India to support democratic aspirations of people. Not now, as I said. We have been very lonely espousers of the democratic cause when many of our neighbors, in fact, the military regimes of our neighbors historically enjoyed Western support. So today, for us to hear that somewhere, we are falling short in this respect, I think that's a little difficult to say. So let me just say this. Our positions have been very clear, but we have to also manage our border relationship. We have to manage the compulsions of being a neighbor. And that's what we are doing.
Thank you. The lady in the black dress before Dr. Manohar. Okay. Yes. Please kindly introduce yourself as well.
Hi, my name is Tatai from Chinese World. So, actually, if I may, two quick questions. So, the first one, basically in Indo-Pacific, as you mentioned, the rise of China, we see increasing influence, especially economic influence of China, not only, of course, in the ASEAN region, but even more immediate neighbors of India, like the northern states as well. So, how do you plan on trying to balance power out, especially in this particular matter, exerting India's influence, for example? And the second question, sorry if this is not directly about Indo-Pacific, but with the ongoing war in Ukraine, and there is this issue of India importing oil from Russia, and this has attracted some criticism. So, what is India's position and plan on this? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll come to you all. I have seen you all. Let the minister handle one by one.
Look, the rise of China is obviously one of the big developments of our lives. There is also the rise of India, and I quite accept that in terms of its pace, in terms of its magnitude, in terms of its global impact, that of China has been much bigger and much stronger. Now, in international relations, countries rise, countries plateau, some societies perhaps are no longer able to keep up the pace of growth. But international relations is fundamentally a competitive activity. It's a contest among nations in many ways. It's not always a contest. There can be cooperation, collaboration as well. There can nations shape each other and influence each other. So, what is happening today in Asia, in the Indo-Pacific, in the world, is you actually have countries whose economies are much larger, whose capabilities are much more, whose ambitions naturally would reflect those very changes, whose influence would reflect that, and that is quite visible in the case of China. Now, what distinguishes China and India is that they are also old civilizations who then struggled for a few centuries during a period of Western dominance, who are today back on the global stage in a much more pronounced way. So for us, I see, I see the consequences of the rise of China as something which is quite logical, which is, to my mind, it's unexpected. It's expected to happen. It can be unexpected because China, at a global stage in the modern era, suddenly is a new factor. So they will behave in their own way and do things in their own way. But so too will India. And I think a lot of what happens is how much India and China are able to harmonize their respective interests. At least apocryphally, Deng Xiaoping is supposed to have said that the Asian century will happen when China and India come together. That possibly is true. But the Asian century will be difficult to happen if India and China don't come together. And I think today one of the big questions is really where China-India relations is going. Because at the moment, the relationship is going through an extremely difficult phase because of what the Chinese have done in the last 2 years in our border area. The second question, the oil question, well, that's an issue which I had to answer in many forums at different points of time. Again, I just want to, in a sense, bring up the issue of different yardsticks of judgment. If you forget my being double standards at times, we are not the only oil importer. And by the way, there are no sanctions on oil. So there are other countries who are importing oil or gas. There are regions who are very articulate on this subject, but who have taken care of their own interests. So I think it's reasonable that we should be allowed to take care of our interests, particularly because we are a low-income society. For us, the increase in energy prices really got it. Every dollar increase in the price of oil is paid for by some Indian through their savings and through their sweat and through their oil. And it costs them in terms of their cost. So when people talk about what we should or we should not do, we are paying the price for this conflict in a very, very existential way. And not just us. The sentiments which I am articulating to you, I can tell you are shared by a very large number of countries in Asia and Africa and Latin America. So there is a real concern today in the global south about energy costs, about food inflation, about shortages, got disrupted today. It's simply not fair on people who are struggling to get out of poverty to be expected to take burdens when countries with much higher per capita income have found ways of softening the blow on the.
Thank you. I will go to Dr. Mano first and then Imtiaz. Okay, I'm trying to arrange it and then I'll come to two. Yes, come on.
Dr. Mano from Nani Institute, Francis University. Your Excellency, since India was told by Russia, Sergei Lavrov paid visit to India last time, he was the only person to allow to talk. He told Narendra Modi that India is a perfect position to negotiate for peace between Ukraine and Russia. So my question is, what the government of India is waiting for is that India can intervene and stop the war. Thank you.
I honestly wish it was as easy as your question would suggest. Because from day one, my Prime Minister has been in touch with President Putin. He's also been speaking to President Zelensky. I myself have been talking to my counterparts in both countries. In fact, I met Mr. Lavrov in Open about 10 days ago. I was speaking to Mr. Kuleba just a few days ago. Look, we have been very clear, very forthright, very unambiguous that the only way out is by return to dialogue and diplomacy. That at some stage the protagonists have to sit down and talk. And if you are going to talk, the sooner you talk, the less bloodshed, the less damage, the less conflict there will be. So it's not for lack of trying or for lack of thinking or for lack of feeling on our part. And we have seen it firsthand because we happen to have 20,000 students out there, and just getting them out itself gave us sort of an insight into the terrible tragedies of that conflict situation. So we have been pushing for it, but at the end of the day, any advice or any effort is as good as the missing. So finally the countries involved also have to be convinced and have to take that role, and that is something that unfortunately has not happened. But let me say this, one of the problems which happened in this conflict was the food shortages because of the inability, especially of grain to export wheat. So the Secretary General of the UN made an effort in this, and Turkey took a lead on this matter. We were very, very supportive of this, and whatever contribution or influence we had on this matter, we also brought it to bear. I myself have had conversations on this with our Russian counterparts. So wherever we can, at the moment, ideally we would of course like to stop the conflict. I mean, we would. But while we keep doing that, at least our effort is to mitigate some of its more difficult aspects. So to the extent, actually, we help to bring oil into the market. The fact is, oil prices, global oil prices are suffering. I mean, if theoretically Russian oil didn't come in at all, oil would be under $50 a barrel higher. So similarly, getting food back into the markets is very, very important. And there are other economic aspects, it's not just oil there. So I think we'll have to work at it at different levels. But I assure you, if there is any time, any place, any way we can make a difference, we will be absolutely ready to do so.
Please introduce yourself now.
Sawadee Namaskar, good morning, Minister. Thank you for your lecture here today and welcome to the panel. My name is Imtiaz Mahmood. I'm a local journalist. You began your lecture by mentioning the 60% GDP of the Asia-Pacific region and the vast population of this part of the world. But in looking at it, the population breakdown of those 3 billion people roughly in this part of the world, we have about 1 billion Indians, about 1 billion Chinese, and about just under 1 billion Muslims. Indonesia, Malaysia, Pakistan, with their population combined. How is it going to be possible for India to actually successfully implement this Indo-Pacific vision when you've got serious policy and political differences with your immediate neighbors in this part of the world, both the Islamic world as well as with China? And how hard are you actually working to settle some of these differences? Because there seems to be some dichotomy between what you say and what you do, particularly in the build-up to the elections coming up in 2024.
I will try and see if I can give a clarity to your question. Essentially what you're saying is if there are parties in this region with different identities and different interests, how will you be able to put them together to realize the purpose? Now, first of all, I want to tell you that I would actually dispute a lot of what you said. You said, well, there are Islamic countries or Muslim countries. You mentioned Indonesia and Malaysia. We work very closely and very well and very positively with these countries. So this very sweeping civilizational, religious sort of assumption you have made, I think frankly is very, very challenging. In international relations, you will have differences. You will also have cooperation, and you will have cooperation with people with whom you have differences. That can happen. We have differences with China. We are very open about it. I mean, at the moment, as I mentioned to the earlier question, we have a very difficult situation. We're going through a very abnormal phase of our relations. But that doesn't mean that we have no cooperation in any forum in any way. Certainly with the ASEAN, all of the ASEAN, irrespective of whatever religious connotation you may suggest out there, we have extremely close, cordial, productive, economically vibrant, politically, I would say, collaborative relationship. It is visible not just at ASEAN gatherings, but in forums like the G20 or the Indian Ocean Rim Association. The point I was communicating is we need to think Indo-Pacific today, because it is no longer possible for the countries in the Pacific to think only Pacific, and for countries in the Indian Ocean to think only Indian Ocean. The nature of the world, the globalization of the world has encouraged us to go beyond those self-imposed barriers or compartments. And in building regional cooperation, when I look at India's external engagement, it's actually quite astonishing how far we have come, to ASEAN, how far we have come to Quad, how far we have moved even in the other direction, since we are talking Indo-Pacific with the Gulf countries, where our ties today are with Africa or with Europe. So it is in many ways a more collaborative world. It has its divisions, it has its tensions, it has its competition. I think we need to factor that in, but there is also a more global desire to get along with life and raise no political. And I think a lot of our collaborative ventures in the Indian Ocean are aimed at that, because a lot of them are also aimed at the global compass. Somebody has to look after the global compass. The days when we could leave that to the United States alone to do, those days are over. So, in a sense, there's a kind of a neighborhood watch mentality which we all need to develop and
ปิดครับยกมือหน่อยครับเนี่ยนะท่านธุรกิจยกมืออยู่นะมาด้านนี้เลยมาด้านนี้เลยไม่เป็นไรครับผ่านไปนิดหนึ่งได้นะเนี่ยนะท่านทูตแนะนำตัวเองด้วยนะครับ
The Presidency, my name is Great Rajat. I was former ambassador to India during 2009 to 2011. I shall briefly about my personal historical life in India. My great-grandfather was the first Siamese Consul General in Kolkata way back in 1917. So suppose that was the first Thai diplomatic representation in India during the British rule. And then came my ambassador Pirat Sena, who was the ambassador to India during Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. And he spent about 3 years there, having very close relationship with the Prime Minister. And then I came was the third generation of ambassador to India. So this is my personal background. So I have a few things to say about Thailand and India relations. Firstly, I'd like to thank for your very comprehensive and enlightened presentation about Indo-Pacific. In fact, India is now one of the world powers who has any role in balancing power in Asia and the world. So I won't speak about that, but I'd like to seek the view about Thailand relation in terms of regional cooperation. First, I've been responsible for BIMSTEC. I think I was one of the first who, when BIMSTEC was found, I was in the industry economic department. And then ASEAN, India, and Mekong Kanga, which I like Your Excellency to share with us how to view, because this is a very important regional cooperation framework for India and ASEAN and the rest of Mekong region. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it is something very interesting. It's got online also. The kind of futures of BIMSTEC as well. Because it's been there since 1997. At the same time, that former ambassador also raised another question of Mekong Ganga Corporation.
You know, very candidly, I think, by the way, all these issues were discussed yesterday in my official discussions with my counterpart. And I think the shared sense we have, both on the Thai side and the Indian side, certainly BIMSTEC has underperformed, that there is great deal of potential in the Bay of Bengal region. You know, if you look, it's very interesting. I mean, part of it is a legacy of history, the lack of adequate recovery thereafter when countries of South Asia got their independence. Even simple things like connectivity, you know, across the Bay of Bengal, we have very limited direct connectivity. Often goods go to some, you know, beyond the Bay of Bengal and then come back into the Bay of Bengal ports. It's an example really of how unnatural, in a way, our dealings and transactions are. And what that distortion is very much part of the colonial legacy. So, a big task for Asia today is actually, you know, these distortions, these lines which have been drawn, this is Southeast Asia, this is South Asia, or, you know, that's the Gulf, or how do you actually restore the normalcy, the historical naturalness of all of that? To me, India, ASEAN today is very, got very substantive achievements to show. We need supportive, smaller, cooperative endeavors. Some of them with different partners, may not have the same partners. It's a kind of success. but it has a different focus. So I think all of that need to be worked upon. And in fact, that's why even in my own talk, I actually mentioned the India-Myanmar Thailand. Because if that project is complete, and again, when I spoke of being as a conversion of being a neighbor of Myanmar, building connectivity, doing a project in Myanmar is also something which I have to continue to do. I can't put that press a pause button and say, okay, I'll come back to it when the political environment is very much better. Because really, the prospects of millions of people depend on this access being completed the sooner the better. So that is a very practical example of actually, if the IMTT moves India, Myanmar, Thailand, it will have a holistic implication, it will have a Mekong implication, it would actually hugely strengthen the connection between South Asia and ASEAN. So your point is well taken. I think they need to invest much more effort. But India and Thailand, we are the two biggest economies of the Pacific. I think if we take a lead, and certainly I think the experience of Thailand is to check Thailand, because it's non-ASEAN, non-APEC, non-East Asia. We have a great history in terms of realizing the potential of tourism, of trade. So I think there are a lot of expectations of Thailand's chair.
Okay, I know that you have raised all your plans, I understand, but can I just intervene one thing? I want to give this opportunity to my Thai students also. Yeah, please, Thai students, if you have questions, I'll give you priority first, and please interact with the minister. Okay, there's one Thai person there. Okay, because please don't get upset. Okay. But again, this is a chance for them also to interact as well, okay? Please, I'll come to you, okay? And if you are not comfortable with English language, you still want to talk with ask some question or make comments, I'll translate for you, okay? Okay.
Thank you. My name is Richard. I'm Poly Science PhD student from Rangkanghan University. My question to you is, what is Indian vision on Thailand, and whether you have any suggestion or what you hope for or expect to achieve in coming year.
Well, you stole my thunder. This is one of the very good questions. Of course, we want to see ourselves from you also. What is the kind of expectation? What do you expect from us, and so on? And I think you are very frank. So, please, Minister.
My expectation of coming here, of course, is, as I said, I was here for a governmental mechanism. We did our business. We reviewed, this is what we've done in trade, this is what we've done in investment. But I like the first part of your question, what's your sense of Thailand today? First of all, I think India and South Asia have a lot to learn from Thailand and Southeast Asia. And I'm not saying that just to please you. I'm sure you're pleased, but and I'll tell you why. Because it is actually in real life very difficult to construct an effective, efficient, positive regional or regional organization. Because to do something collectively, countries have to do these trade-offs. They have to give something to get something. And it's easier said than done because we've often seen that unfortunately is no longer the case, especially with bigger families. So when I look at Thailand, first of all, to me, Thailand is one of the key players of ASEAN. When I said, look, I see Thailand both as a partner and as an example. The exemplar with is I look at Thailand in ASEAN. The second is the areas, where Thailand has really played to its strengths, where I think there's nothing to do. I look at what we've done in Thailand with tourism. It's something really very low. How you grown it to become a major part of the economy. Today in India, under Modi's government, there's a much stronger awareness of the tourism potential of India. And certainly that's something where there's a lot that we can get with. Also, Thailand in terms of making it easier to do business, its investment policies, its trade policies, its supply chain policies. I think again there is something out there. There is also the strong cultural side of Thailand. That certainly I think appeals to a lot of Indians. It appeals to me. I know it appeals to a lot of other people because in an era earlier of westernization and now as globalization, and often globalization is equated with westernization. It is important for societies not to have a loss of culture or tradition or knowledge or identity. And that can happen, it has to. So, but again, I think it's very admirable to see Thai society. It's the small things of life. The small things of life when you put them together are really different. Food, dress, way of eating, the courtesy, the etiquette, the social behavior. These things make a big difference. And I think societies who want to preserve and grow their tradition and culture, they need to take strength from each other. There's a lot that I see in Thailand. But most of all for me, given my interest in defense, I actually am very fascinated by historically how Thailand has navigated its diplomatic practice. And if I were to take maybe the last 150 years, a little bit more, maybe last 50 years, Thailand is actually a standout country in terms of how it went through, look at the most difficult conflict of the last century, the Second World War. There were very, very few countries, or even when the colonialists hit a country which preserved its independence, a country which kept its freedom of choice, which actually managed much bigger powers with great experience. I think there's a lot of that.
I raised my hand much earlier, but
Okay, no worries. You
Can we
can
go
go
back?
ahead. You can go ahead.
thank you very much for that opportunity, and thank you, Minister, for some great insights. I'm Gwen Robinson, editor at large at Nikkei Asia, and
กลางให้กว้างเล็กขึ้นสูงขึ้นมา
have a number of queries, but I'll limit it to two, and one is just coming back to the issue of ASEAN and your very positive remarks about it. Actually, recently we've seen almost a paralysis over the issue of Myanmar in the body, and an unprecedented suggestion to suspend a member. Also, its principles of centrality and non-interference are kind of in tatters. This was very much on the agenda when the Malaysian Foreign Minister came here last week and had talks with the Thais. I think there's some very, very different views in ASEAN about how to handle Myanmar. So it is becoming a fairly fundamental issue in dealing with the region. So what is your perspective in terms of dealing with ASEAN as a cohesive bloc and some of these extraordinary upheavals over Myanmar? I have a second question, if I can put that, and that is about the Rohingya, which is becoming more and more of an issue. And as you might know, Myanmar, the junta has suggested beginning repatriation in less than 2 weeks, which is possibly impossible. But as the extremely important external player, what is your view or India's view on what next for this festering problem on your doorstep and in Bangladesh?
On ASEAN and Myanmar, there is a certain ASEAN way of dealing with it. It's often a patient way, it's a persistent way, it's often a tactful way. But at the end of the day, it's very perseverant. Now, when the coup happened in Myanmar, obviously, there were reactions from different parts of the world. Different people had their own ideas what to do. And the years that I've done in diplomacy, usually I trust people closer to the problem than people far away. Because people far away have a tendency to walk away when they feel that. So they're not always kind of attached to their own prescriptions. We saw that in Afghanistan. Our decision was who is best placed we know this is an extremely difficult problem, and that's probably an understatement. Who is best placed to actually engage to see what can be done? And I think the intuitive answer in the larger neighborhood is that the ASEAN is best placed. Now, we all know there is a diversity of opinion even within the ASEAN, and that's natural. If there are 10 countries in a grouping, all 10 cannot be expected to have the identical view. But my point about the ASEAN is show me anything better, and I don't think that's so. So we have, I myself earlier with Mr. Ediman in Brunei and now with Chulalongkorn in Cambodia, ASEAN chair as well as individual ASEAN countries. We've been talking to them and we've been continually telling them, any messaging, any dealing, anything that we have to do, we will do it in a way in which will be supportive of your interests. Now, we've never hidden the fact that as a neighbor, we will have our particular convictions. I mentioned in response to the first question, we have COVID on our borders. We have people crossing over. We have insurgents on our borders. We have seen in recent months that we had a very senior military officer who was actually ambushed and killed along with his family. So where there are specific problems specific to us, we will find ways of doing it. But overall, we would like to work with the ASEAN and with the UN special representative, who many of us happen to know. I don't think any of us is expecting an instantaneous or even an early fix. But show me something which is a better avenue of action. I don't think there is one. The second issue, the Rohingya issue, here Bangladesh has borne the brunt of that. And it's something we have very closely and intensively discussed with the Bangladesh government. And I know from discussion with them that what really matters to them is in some way to start the process of people going back. Because if you wait for absolutely ideal conditions, and now nobody is suggesting people going back to this, but I think people want a good condition for, decent conditions, secure enough conditions for Rohingya refugees to go back. And thirdly, we have been supportive of Bangladesh, and we have tried through projects in the Rakhine State to see whether there can be some pilot projects which will allow the first set of people to go back, so that once there is some return, there is a shift in the dynamics. Because otherwise we can keep arguing over the problem, and I don't think the problem will be.
Okay, yes, you?
My name is Lina Aman from International IDEA, Institute of Democracy, Electoral Assistance, and we are honored to have India as one of our founding members as well. My question is, how do you see in practice India's role in supporting democracy, human rights in the Indo-Pacific region, and do you have any message for those defending democracy in the region, including in Thailand? Thank you.
It's not just democracy, but how countries espouse their values and beliefs is not uniform. I'm sure that's not a surprise. A large part of the global south, because they went through a long period of foreign occupation and colonialism, they are also sensitive to sovereignty concerns even while they need rebuilding themselves. Interestingly, our experiences, Western countries, when it suits them, tend to push democratic values much more strongly, very, shall I say, their sense of sovereignty being modulated for the application. So, if you ask me, would I support democracy generally? Answer is yes. In the Indo-Pacific, my answer would be yes. Would I intuitively sympathize with people who practice democracy or believe in it? My answer to you would be yes. But I would also be respectful of nationals, policies, national sentiments, sovereignty consideration, because that is the nature, in a sense, of the post-colonial world. Whereas the colonial world, in a way, is very disregarding of sovereignty, because their dominance was built on violating human sovereignty. And they will continue to carry a lot of that mindset even into the contemporary era. So the challenge today is not just do we all agree on dominance, it's also how do we each practice it in a way in which we are comfortable with our own history, with our own past, with our own sense of what is wrong and what is right.
Okay, the gentleman behind there is trying to make it proportionate, okay? So it reflects other people as well voices. Yes, where you from, sir?
My name is Kalim Senior at my Indian Affairs. My question is to Sri Lanka. At the moment, Sri Lanka is facing problems IMF negotiations, and what they have offered could make the situation worse for the people, and there would be a nationalist backlash. Now, this may create the opportunity for the BRICS to come, because India
We get opportunity for whom?
BRICS. Yeah, Brazil, Russia, India, China. Now, India, China, Russia have been talking for the last few years about building a new architecture, economic architecture, global economic architecture. Now, Sri Lanka could be a best case for this. To come in as BRICS to come in as what IMF has been doing. There are the interests of developing countries will be given priority. For that to happen, India and China need to agree. How do you see this situation?
I think if India and China have to come together. There are a lot of reasons to do so, not necessarily only Sri Lanka. I think it's in India, China's own interest to find the modus vivendi, and we very much hope that wisdom dawns on the Chinese side. Regarding your line of thinking in respect of Sri Lanka's problems, Sri Lanka has obviously a very serious balance payments issue, but it has a lot of other economic issues. Most countries in such a situation, the logical place for them to go to is the IMF. Because if you look at the last 60, 70 years of global economics, in situations of such economic distress, only the IMF is a collective response to a country's state. What the Sri Lankan government does, how they push it, that is their call. They have a sovereign government. They will do, I assume, what is in the best interest of the Sri Lankan people. When India is concerned, we have tried to the best of our ability to assist Sri Lanka in this very difficult situation. This year alone, we have extended $3.8 billion of support. Lines of credit, rolling over of trade settlements, the swap arrangements. But those will themselves not deal with Sri Lanka's issues, because Sri Lanka's issues are revenue generation. It is about what are the expenditures, it is about what are the debts that Sri Lanka has. And the projects Sri Lanka is doing, how the viability of some of those projects. I mean, it's a very, very complex matter. I would say the best help that we can give is one, what we have done. And any support we can give to Sri Lanka in the IMF, that is something naturally that we will do. We are an immediate neighbor. We have already heard me speak about how neighbors are the most impacted when something goes wrong. And therefore neighbors are the strongest in some kind of solution. It's not just us, I would say that, but I will discuss. So I think that will be approach we will.
Okay, I have to edit here because the minister also has other engagements, okay? May I now invite, it's already in, and we cannot, right? Because there are about 25 more questions, so you can imagine, the minister might have to stay here until 1 o'clock. Sorry, okay? May I invite Assistant Professor Chirayut Sintupan to deliver a vote of thanks, please?
Good morning, Namaskar. On behalf of the Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University, and organizer of this talk, I feel truly honored to be here to deliver the vote of thanks on behalf of the organizer and the university. Firstly, I wish to express my sincere gratitude to the External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, who kindly delivered an experience talk on the topic of India's vision of the Indo-Pacific. Your answer to many questions were as thought-provoking, illuminating, and frank as always. The things that strike me most is the visions of the Indo-Pacific regions as a region that is equal, collaborative, inclusive, sustainable, and especially constructive, respectful, and equal. So thank you again, Your Excellency, for your illuminating visions of the Indo-Pacific. I also wish to thank Her Excellency Chulalongkorn, the Ambassador of India to Thailand, for being always supportive to all of us at Chulalongkorn University. I truly thank you from the bottom of my heart. The talk today wouldn't be possible if you didn't help us. And I also want to extend my thanks to all the audience for being here with us today. And last but not least, I would like to thank all the staff at Chulalongkorn University and the Institute of Asian Studies who worked to ensure that this talk is organized in accordance with the plans. And I would like to extend my thanks to them on behalf of us here. So thank you again, Your Excellency, for being here with us. And thank you, the audience, for being with us today.
For the last program, may I invite Associate Professor Dr. Nonoy Pirak, Director of Institute of Asian Studies, Chulalongkorn University, to present tokens of appreciation to our Minister. Okay, please kindly stay here, do not leave, okay, except the Minister and all those who have to accompany the Minister, kindly cooperate so that we don't have traffic jam outside. We have prepared you brilliant lunch, okay, so wait to take for your lunch. Once again, well round of applause for the Minister.